For great Pokemon TCG product and prices, check out ccgcastle.com.
Hello, Pokemon fans! I'm Professor K for the Pokemon Evolutionaries, and welcome to another Deck Tech Thursday, where we take a look at the competitive decks that are doing well in the format right now and break them down and show you guys what they are all about. Now, this week's deck profile is going to be one of the decks that is going to be very hyped up going into Georgia Regionals, with the recent surgence of Yveltal Garb just dominating the last few tournaments. There's always the answer of what is going to beat what is doing the best right now. And right now, the solid counter to Yveltal Garb is this deck right here. Bees! Return of Vespiquen, a very old favorite. Maybe not necessarily always in this form, but it was also in the last form in the form of Flareon. So, this is a deck that can hit for lots of damage, not really hurt quite so much by Garb. It's hurt a little bit, just a little bit. But by the time Garb is set up, most of the time this deck has already done what it needs to do. This deck hits for large amounts of numbers, and it only gives up one prize attackers. So, that is a deck that Yveltal Garb struggles with. Now, as you guys can see here, I'm actually using my ARG Invitational mat. ARG is a great organization that does a lot of tournaments and stuff, that mostly for cash prizes and things like that. So if you guys aren't familiar with ARG, definitely check out argcircuitseries.com. You guys can go and check that out. They have a lot of different events that are going around across the country right now, and Invitational is one of them that you can qualify for. There's qualifiers everywhere, but you guys can check them out for more information. Great group of guys over there. So, let's go ahead and see what makes this deck work exactly as well as it does. So first and foremost, we're going to be looking at the first stage of our main attacker, and that is Combee. 4 Combee to be exact. Nothing really too special here, just the fact that you need 4 Combee to make this deck work. Obviously, you need as much Vespiquen as you can get. And speaking of Vespiquen, here is your main attacker of the deck. Here we go, 4 of them right here. Now, the reason why this is so good, right there. Bee Revenge. You're dealing 20 damage plus 10 more damage for each Pokemon in your discard pile. So this is pretty much unlimited damage, depending on how many Pokemon you have into your deck. Now, I can't remember exactly what the numbers are with this. I want to say 270 is the max that this can hit for, is 270. That's a lot of damage. So that's going to be your main attacker, and that is what is going to start wrecking house for you. Now, here's the thing. We got to get Pokemon in the discard pile. Battle Compressor has rotated, so how can we do it? Well, we're going to start off with this right here. Built-in draw support and fuel for Vespiquen. 4 copies of Unknown. Now, Unknown's main purpose and only reason for being here is Farewell Letter. Once during your turn before your attack, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may discard this Pokemon and all cards attached to it. This does not count as a knockout, and if you do, draw a card. So you are basically taking a Pokemon, benching it, and throwing it immediately into the discard pile in exchange for draw power. How can you beat that? I mean, this deck needs a lot of draw power to succeed properly without clogging up your hands too much with extra Pokemon. So this is one way to do it. Unknown, boom, fuel for Vespiquen, draw card. Fantastic, gotta love it. Now, the deck still does need some more draw power, and it also needs some more Pokemon to throw in the discard pile when you don't need them. And that's going to come in the form of, unfortunately guys, sorry, but Shaymin EX is just too important in competitive play. You're gonna need 3 copies of Shaymin EX for the setup ability. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand. It's just too important, guys. I can't leave it out, I'm sorry. Only 2 decks right now in the format that can do well without Shaymin, Gyarados and Greninja. And even then, doing well is kind of a figure of speaking. I mean, it definitely has its inconsistencies, but those are the best 2 chances you have of making a deck work without Shaymin. Okay, so next up here is a rather new addition to Vespiquen, and that's going to come in the form of 2 copies of Blitzel. Now, Blitzel is obviously here for no reason other than to evolve into Zebstrika. So here is our secondary attacker, Zebstrika. Zebstrika has an ability called Zap Zone. Damage from the attacks of your lightning Pokemon are not affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So it's pretty much a way of going through everything. You're not going to have to worry about Glaceon and things like that. You're going to go right through them. So that's one thing that's really good about this. Also, Crashing Bolt does 50 damage. And if your opponent's active Pokemon has fighting resistance, it does 60 more damage. So 110 on a Pokemon that is resistant to fighting. What Pokemon right now is resistant to fighting? Well, there's a few. There's Talonflame in Greninja, so that's pretty cool. There's Pidgeot, which is seeing a little bit of play, but oh, wait a minute. Yveltal EX is resistant to fighting, and it's weak to lightning. So you're not hitting for 110, you're hitting for 220 damage, which is enough to KO a Yveltal EX even with a Fighting Fury belt. Now, isn't that just amazing? Gotta love Zebstrika for that reason. That is why it has a place in this deck. Now, Zebstrika is great, but what about your other matchups where you only really have a choice for Vespiquen? Well, this is where a suggestion from Safraz from the meta deck comes into play. If you guys don't follow them, go check them out. Safraz from the meta deck, great dude. Tyler works with the channel as well. Lots of other great people, and you guys, it's such a great idea. I love it. Safraz comes up with some really good ideas. He's helped me with a few deck ideas as well. So go check him out, youtube.com/theMetaDeck. All right, here we go. 2 copies of Pikachu. What? Oh, okay. Well, you know, Pikachu is just there to be evolved into. So, Raichu. 2 copies of Raichu. Obviously, Crashing Bolt is only going to do 50 damage to something that's not resistant to fighting. You know, it's not that great. But Raichu has the ability to hit for a lot more damage. Circle Circuit does 20 damage times the number of Pokemon on your bench side. That does 20 damage times the number of your benched Pokemon. So you can deal 100 damage with this, and you can deal 50 damage with this. What would you rather choose? I would take Raichu all day long. And if it's weak to electric but not resistant to fighting, well, there's 200. It doesn't get too much better than that, right? So there is Raichu for that reason. And notice that all of these attackers are only using 1 energy, and that is a double colorless energy. Raichu, double colorless. Zebstrika, double colorless. Vespiquen, double colorless. Versatility across the board. Now we do have a few more Pokemon here to add to the mix because Unknown, since you have the ability to attach something to it and discard it, because you discard everything, this and whatever's attached to it, well, it only makes sense to put in Klefki. Now, Klefki is a really cool Pokemon, and I think the deck only needs 3 of them, but it's great for a few reasons. Number 1, its ability, during your turn, before you attack, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may discard all cards attached to this Pokemon and attach it to one of your Pokemon as a Pokemon tool card. Prevent any damage done to your Pokemon that this card is attached to by attacks from your opponent's Mega Evolution Pokemon. If this card is attached to a Pokemon, discard this card at the end of your opponent's turn. So what can you do with this? Well, there's a couple things. If you're facing against a deck that plays Mega Pokemon, this is your way out. You can attach this to Vespiquen and they cannot hurt you. Now first, of course, you must bench it. Then you must activate its ability. Then you can attach it as a Pokemon tool card. So if Garbodor is active or if they played Hex, you're not going to be able to do it. But as long as you're able to use abilities, bench, ability, attach, no Mega Evolution attacks are possible. There's a couple other things. If you're not playing against the Mega matchup, or if you just don't really care, you can bench it, attach it to Unknown, and Farewell Letter away both of them into your discard pile. So now you're getting rid of 2 Pokemon instead of 1 with Farewell Letter. So much use for this one simple little Pokemon, and that is Klefki. So 3 Klefki for that reason. Also, you might find your opponent digging for resources in a way to kind of get out of a bad situation. And you may be out of attackers. You may be out of Vespiquen. You may be out of Zebstrika. You may be out of Raichu. You got nothing left. Well, there's still one more hope, and that is decking out your opponent. That is where Bunnelby comes into play. You can burrow, discard the top card of your opponent's deck, and you can use its Omega Barrier attack, or ability, I should say, not ability, but it's an ancient trait, to attack again and burrow a second card away. So you can make your opponent discard 2 cards. Pretty good. Also, Rototiller, you can shuffle a card from your discard pile back into your deck. So you could also use this to make yourself to put yourself back into the game once again by putting cards that you need from your discard pile back into your deck. It's a little bit of a last-ditch effort kind of card, but it's there. So that gives our total Pokemon count 27 Pokemon, which means a Vespiquen can hit for 250, because 10 for everything, plus 20, 270. You're knocking out just about everything, except for a Fighting Fury belted Wailord, which, wait a minute, Actually, no, I take that back. Yes, you are, because it's weak to grass, and you're hitting for 540 damage. So yeah, it knocks out everything. Like literally everything. Gotta love it. So that's it for the Pokemon lineup. Let's take a look at the supporters here. The supporter lineup is fairly straightforward for a Vespiquen deck. Maybe a little bit unusual from what you're used to seeing, but pretty much straightforward. So there's gonna be 4 copies of Professor Sycamore. This is a deck that is reliant on discarding. So discarding your hand and drawing 7 cards, you may have a handful of Pokemon that you want nothing to do with. You can just toss them out and fuel your attacks. 1 copy of N. Only 1. Because, again, shuffle draw, not quite as important in a deck that wants to get really, really quickly ahead of the game and start getting prize cards taken. So N, only need 1 of them. Throw that down there. Shuffle and each player shuffle their hand into their deck and draw as many cards as they have prizes remaining. So there's 1 for that reason. We also have not 1, but 2 copies of Lysander. Vespiquen deals so much damage. Why not take advantage of it? Why not Lysander something up that's going to take 2 prizes for the game and get more prizes that way, possibly even win a game that way. So 2 copies of Lysander gives you that consistency of, hey, if I'm going to play Lysander, I have a better chance of getting it when I have 2 of them as opposed to 1. You can discard 1 and VS Seeker it later if you have to as well. Also, Vespiquen originally played a 1/1 Garb. That's how this deck was in the first place. 1/1 Garb, 3 Floatstone. We took out the 1/1 Garb and 2 of the Floatstones for Raichu. So we still have a little bit of a problem against decks that play with abilities. So we do have 1 copy of Hex Maniac, being able to shut off everyone's abilities for 1 turn, yours and your opponent's. So we have that for that. Another new addition to this deck is a Team Flare Grunt. You're going to discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. That can really change the game, can really mess with numbers. So that is another cool card to have in there. And also 1 more, because this deck really doesn't need stadiums. It plays 1, but you can punish your opponent for playing stadiums by playing Delinquent. You can discard a stadium card in play. If you do, your opponent discards 3 cards from his or her hand. That's crazy. That can mess with everybody. Their hand is only 3 cards, you've just gotten rid of their entire hand. They have nothing to do. And most of the time, 3 is a pretty devastating number to lose out of your hand into the discard pile. So there's 1 copy Delinquent for that as well. Now onto our items. There's a lot of items in this deck, but there's a lot of those particular items, so it's a pretty consistent deck. We've got 4 copies of VS Seeker. Obviously, get a supporter card out of the discard pile. Very important. I don't know what we ever did before VS Seeker, to be honest. It's such a good card. Also, we have 4 copies of Ultra Ball. Discard 2 cards, find a Pokemon in the deck, put it in your hand. Obviously, this is good for getting your hand size down for Shaman, and it's also a good way of getting rid of Pokemon while you're looking for Pokemon you actually want. Also, another way to get through your deck, 4 copies of Acrobike. Look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put 1 of them into your hand, discard the other. So there you have that. That can throw away a Pokemon and get a DCE in your hand or something to that effect. The deck also plays 2 copies of Special Charge because we only run 4 copies of Double Colorless Energy. This is how we have to get it back. Sometimes you have to discard energy when you don't want to. Sometimes we get Enhanced Hammered when we don't want to. Sometimes Team Flare Grunt comes in and says, hey, you're gonna get rid of this, so Special Charge makes a big difference. And we run 2 of them just to be on the safe side. Also, we run an Enhanced Hammer of our own. So we have 1 Flare Grunt, 1 Enhanced Hammer to take care of our opponent's energy and kind of slow them down a little bit when they're not expecting it. Also, we have 1 copy of Floatstone because sometimes you just have something in the active that you don't want there. Sometimes you start with Unknown. You gotta get it out of the active somehow. So Floatstone takes care of that. Also, sometimes you have to discard a Combee or a Vespiquen early and you don't want to, or it gets knocked out and you're not ready for it. 1 copy of Revitalizer. Get 2 grass Pokemon out of your discard pile, put them into your hand. Straightforward and very simple. We also have 1 copy of Super Rod, just in case, again, you burn through that Revitalizer, you gotta get some Vespiquen back, you gotta get your Raichu line back, Substrike, whatever the case is, you wanna get some more draw power, you get Unknown back. You can do that with Super Rod, put them back into the deck. 3 of them, as a matter of fact. The deck runs 1 Stadium card, and that is 1 Force of Giant Plants. Going second can kind of hurt sometimes, so if you have Force of Giant Plants in play, you're able to evolve on the same turn and attack. So that's kind of important. And finally, last but certainly not least, our energy line. 4 double colorless energy. That is it. That is everything. This is your entire energy line. 4 double colorless energies. So obviously this is a very powerful deck, and it depends on drawing through the deck quickly. If you can't draw through the deck quickly, you're not going to get to your DCEs, you're not going to be able to attack, you're not going to be able to attack for much damage unless you have a lot in the discard pile for B-Revenge, or if you have a lot on your bench for Circle Circuit. Maximum 100 damage, maximum 110 damage, maximum 270 damage. It's clear who you really want to be attacking with most of the time, but there's situations where Zebstrika and Raichu have their better uses. Circle Circuit can hit for 200 for weakness. This can hit for 220 for weakness. So big numbers to be made here when weakness is being added into the game, and Vespiquen obviously hits for a lot on its own. So anyways, guys, that is the deck. This is everything right here. Again, shout out to Safras from the Meta Deck for some ideas on helping to improve this deck just a little bit. I kind of like it. I do. I'm not always really into Vespiquen. I've never been a huge Vespiquen player, but this is a fun deck. I have to say, it's fun, and yeah, it's a little bit expensive because of Shaman, but other than Shaman, it's really not that bad. So, it's a deck to consider, something to be prepared for at Athens, and also something to maybe consider playing at Athens because of Yveltal Guard. It beats it pretty easily. So, there you guys have it. Hopefully you enjoyed this deck profile. If you did, be sure to hit that like button, comment down below, subscribe for more TCG content, and stay tuned for next Friday, not tomorrow, next Friday, where I use this deck to face off against whatever N decides to build for his Deck Tech Thursday next week, same time, 1 week from today. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today. We'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, I'm Professor K for the Pokemon Evolutionaries. You all take care.